let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show, we're welcoming Tim back, but during the episode we will refer to him as XL Tim, just so there's no confusion.
Hello, XL Tim, how are you?
I am great, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing good.
Thrilled to be here.
Doing good. We're glad to have you back. We think you were such a superstar the last time. It was just an absolute insistence to have you back on the program, so thank you for making the time. And today we are going to be talking about kind of more the masculine side of things. Again, kind of taking it from that heterosexual perspective, because it's a thing, right? Like, especially as Tim and I as queer men, it's kind of the whole trauma thing. Most men go,
trauma?
Well, you know, the reject, typically speaking, and maybe this is not the case for Gen Z and for Alpha. That would be nice for a bit of progress there. But when I was going through school, and certainly when Tim was going through school, the way that it worked was if you were not straight, you were treated very poorly for that factoid. And so many queer men experience a kind of dissonance with masculinity that we in and of ourselves are in process to resolving. But for yourself, XL Tim, obviously that's something that you walk through every day, you have your own experiences with, and as I'm sure will come through in our discussion today, shifts and has some amendment somewhat when it comes to the weight gain journey. So listen, are you ready to get into it?
100%.
Ah, fabulous. So listen, as a male feedist, what is your perception of the expectations of men in the feedist community?
Boy, I've seen so many roles. I can't, like, it's hard to nail down. In a lot of ways, I would say, there's definitely the dominant side of it, whether it's being a feeder or feedee, where you're the person who is being the strong one, the dom, demanding maybe, whether it's being fed or feeding another. Then obviously the more sub side, which is where I fall, where, and as a feedee, where I very much submit to someone who is more dominant, to someone who really pushes hard for me to eat more, to what have you, while still trying to maintain some sense of realism, which has certainly been an issue at plenty of times where it's, well, you have to eat this and then this. It's like, well, that's not going to happen. Let's be realistic here. I'm not, because I'm gonna get sick. So trying to keep that going. It's interesting though too. I grew up an athlete. I was a bit of an alpha myself. I played football, played basketball, and then to see the change, excuse me, as someone who saw himself as very masculine and very appealing to women, that when I got fat, to see that change was a real eye opener. It really, simple things of where there were women that didn't find me as funny as others did, and then I would see these other guys, thin, quote unquote attractive, making dog shit jokes, and women just laughing to no end about it. I'm like, what is happening? This offends me as a funny person, because I like to think I've always been funny, even though present what I'm saying excluded. That it would bother the hell out of me. But then I thought, you know what, this is the choice I made. This is part of who I've decided to become. And I can't get mad at other people for how they feel about things. And what they're into, because here I am trying to get people to accept me for what I'm into, failing at it, mind you, but in my regular life in this community, I found wonderful people. So yeah, something like that. I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting, and I think we would have talked a little bit about this last time. It is very much that comparativeness of what we experience as queer men. As you live your life as a slender queer male, you are the height of desired. You are the epitome of what is perceived to be valued and sexy and good. And then as you progress into fatness, you don't take a step down or a step back. It's like an invisible force yeets you off the edge and you just plummet into immediate seventh ring of hell isolation where no one can be bothered looking at you. Which probably explains why many of us cling to our community as much as we do, because this is the people in the whole planet of humans that understand who we are and what we do and why we do it. So, that all makes a lot of sense. But it is interesting to hear that there's a little bit of both, right? Like you were saying, that there is an expectation for men on the fetus side to still remain dominant, whether they are feeders or feedees. But as you say, there's also some expectation of submission as well. I mean, do you think that there's a lean towards one or the other for the community? Do people expect men to be more dominant or submissive, or how does that tend to play out?
In my experience, I find a lot more expectation of being dominant. Now, that's just from my experience. I'm not casting it out on anyone else, but I think that's what I've seen. Because as a submissive man, it's very hard to find a dominant woman, for me anyway. Who's looking for a sub man. Almost every woman that I've ever been in a relationship with, or even been physical with, is almost always looking for a dominant man, and some will attempt to play the part, but it just doesn't work. It's the same as when I try to be dominant. In my head, I'm like, I'm really doing this, but it's the same as like if I were trying to be tall. I'm 5'8". It is what it is. Or if I right now tried to say that I'm thin, it's just not happening. So I do find that to be the expectation myself.
Yeah. And to that point, let's just remember, if anyone listening has a different experience, you can write into us at thiccradio@gmail.com and share your experiences, and we may even have you on the show to share your thoughts. But this, of course, is the grace of someone who's given the time and the opportunity to be here to share their thoughts. So, do that. Tim, what were you about to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, so there's no aspiring dominatrixes. How do you pluralize dominatrix? There are no aspiring dominatrixes in your. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I was just basically trying to say that, like, because we kind of, in the world of BDSM, you're kind of fed this line that there are more doms than there are subs, right? And I have with my 10 years in the leather community, I've noticed that is also the case. There are far more subs than there are doms. So I was just, it was kind of interesting to hear that it's basically the same situation in the heterosexual community.
As I've seen it, yeah. There's plenty you can find that are sex workers, and God bless them. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's wonderful, but I'm not looking to pay someone for it. I would like to find, and not to say that makes me special or anything different, but I would just like to find that in a partner.
Have you ever considered looking in the leather community for that kind of thing?
I've dipped my toe a little bit. I cannot think of the site that I have gone on to look for that.
FetLife, Recon.
FetLife, thank you. I tried. I went to a meeting. Probably cheapers, probably 7 years ago now. That was it was a female-led group, and they were great. It just, I don't know. It was just something. Everything was terrific. There was nothing wrong. It just wasn't the vibe for me.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just because it was the first time I went and I just kind of never went back. But yeah, I don't know. I've found some women who would be willing to. It just, we didn't click. We didn't have that vibe. And I need more than just that. Same with feedism. You know, I've talked to, women who've wanted to feed me, and it's more than that to me. It's not just,
It's not just
come on over.
There's a romance element to it almost, or at the very least,
Yes.
social, emotional, intellectual, something that goes beyond just the wham bam can
You're looking for intimacy.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
I don't think that's unreasonable. Something we certainly come across as a recurring thing with the podcast is just how many people are desperate for that intimacy. And I don't say desperation as a negative either. I think that desperation actually makes a lot of sense, because I imagine it's the same in the fetus spaces as it is in the gaining spaces. We're very good at selling sex and fantasy, and you can have this if you pay for it. But actually, when it comes down to just making friends and facilitating conversation and developing better friendships, we're really in the beginning stages of that as a community overall. So that desperation for connection, I don't see as a negative reflection on people. I think it makes sense that people are really craving that,
They're hungry for it.
Yeah, literally hungry for it, both for the food and for the people. I'm curious to know, because you describe yourself as certainly more of a submissive within the fetus space. Is that something that you could identify with pre-gaining? Or is it something that's come about specifically because of gaining? Or were you more dominant before the gaining? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I fancied myself much more dominant before gaining, before I knew anything about who I was, because I thought that's what I was supposed to be. I thought that was my role. And so that was the role I took. And then when I realized I was into that, then, all right, I must be a feeder. And so that's the role I took as well. And then it wasn't till I started gaining that I thought, oh shit, this is pretty great. And then I met someone on, I don't remember where I met her, but we talked on that Yahoo chat, if you remember that. And she opened up this whole world to me of chastity and punishment and given tasks and all these things. I was like, oh my God, it blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. And then she was into bigger men, not so much feedism, but they kind of, they went a little bit hand in hand. We never met. We just chatted for, I don't know, probably 6-7 months. But yeah, it was pretty great. And then from there, that's what really set me down that path where I all right, I'm a submissive, and this is really what boils my potato.
Boils your potato. Love that. I think it's interesting because, again, I think this is just going to be a theme, I think, with a lot of these straight apps, again, that comparativeness to queerness. And one of the reasons why I do think that, people who, like yourself, cisgendered, heterosexual people, but are kinksters, I don't know, maybe this is a bit of a divisive notion, but I would actually include you in the queer community by that notion, because I feel like the queer community is meant to really represent anything that does not fall in the cis-het hegemony, right? And I think much like this, even just what we've had today, this conversation on kink, what you're experiencing is very clearly like a differentiation from the societal expectation. So I don't know how you'd feel about that or how other people within that space would feel about that, but I don't know. I think it just makes sense. Those experiences don't seem very different to me, and it is really interesting how among queer people, queer men will often say, we're very thankful for our homosexuality because it's kind of the shunt that gets the choo-choo off the tracks. And when you can kind of get off the track, the circle you're going in, you can actually see it for what it is. And you go, oh my God, like this was that. And now that I'm off, courtesy of this thing, I can really go into the world and kind of make my own way. And I feel like for yourself, the gaining process was kind of your key into that kind of an experience. Would you say that that's a correct assessment?
Very much so. Absolutely. I'll say going back to especially when we talked about masculinity, and I think I talked about this on the last time I was on. I grew up with a fear of homosexuality because of my parents and my sister specifically. I think I mentioned my sister. I was born in '76, so I was a kid when AIDS started to become the public eye, and she told me if a gay person touches you with their finger, you could get AIDS. And then by the time I was in high school, that's when I realized, boy, my family and my family in general are morons, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And then it was in high school that I first met homosexuals. And I could say that too. I was like, oh wow, this is you're forgive me how this sounds, but in my head, this is you're just regular people. And that was a big thing to me. And then from there, though, I've always hated when people make anyone else feel less than. I was proud of myself for still feeling that I'm still a man, and I think I still represent that, to myself. But I'm also compassionate. I'm also empathetic, and I'm also willing to stand up for other people. And so, bringing this all back, getting fat was the first time I ever experienced anything like that. I grew up, like I said, I played a lot of sports. I was athletic. I got the attention of women. I was always able to, get my way into the cool kids club. And so that was the first time I ever really experienced that. And it was a pretty big awakening. And to especially where I thought maybe this isn't right. And so I would lose weight, and then, what? No, this is right. I'm going to gain weight. And really, it wasn't until probably my mid-30s that I really finally said, fuck it. Like, this is who I am. This is what I want to be.
But I'm kind of curious to ask here. So obviously, in that process of experiencing fatness and now very clearly obesity, do you feel like the way that you conduct yourself, shall we say, is any different to how you would have conducted yourself prior to stepping into that gaining journey?
I do. I think I try to, I not try to, I embrace who I am. And when I say that, before it's like, trying to think, example of, I just would see this a lot. If someone said, oh my God, I've gotten so fat. No, you haven't. That kind of, or you try to hide it and pretend like you're not. I turned a corner when I said I'd be proud of who you are. And so I would do exactly that. And I would, do you want to go play ball? No, I'm too fat for that. And then people get uncomfortable by that. And, that wasn't my intention, but, I don't want to hide and be like, no, I got something else to do, or, be a liar or be a bullshitter. I should call it a liar, because if you're not comfortable saying things like that, then that's totally fine. But to me, that's how I felt. I felt like I was being a phony. And so when I finally started to kind of admit that, or, not be afraid to get a dessert, not be afraid to, hey, let's stop here for drive-through. Or, if no one's going to finish these donuts, I'm going to do it because they're delicious and fuck you. And oh, shoot, I just lost what I was going to say. Damn it. The way I dress as well. I used to wear very baggy clothes because I tried to, it was silly, but in my head I was hiding, or, people might think, well, maybe he's just working out. Now I don't hide that. And I wear my pants up high proudly. So it kind of accentuates my belly. To tuck my shirt in, where I always used to untuck my shirt, just because I like being who I am and I want to show that off. And if there's someone that appreciates it, I want to flaunt it for them. I want them to see. So, someone might come and show their interest. It hasn't, not a lot of it happening yet, but figure I'll cast the net.
Well, time is time is time, and time will tell, and the right people will come. I think people have said this kind of thing since time immemorial. It's always put your best self forward because the right people will come to that, and then you never have to worry if they like you for you because they like you for your authenticity. So I think that's a totally valid approach. I am curious to ask, from your experience, the way that you, I guess, conduct yourself now, the way you live your life and express yourself now as a fatter person, do you feel like that runs in some ways counter to these traditionalist ideas of masculinity and things that you've grown up with?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, kind of as I was saying before, you're supposed to not draw attention to it. You're supposed to feel shame about it, and I don't want people to have to feel that way. If they do, it's fine, because we all have to get to where we get to on our own timetable. But yeah, I think it does run against that idea, because you're supposed to want to go to the gym, and you're supposed to want to eat healthy, and try to attract a certain type of person, who finds that attractive. And yeah, I got no time for that myself, because I want to be something different.
It's understandable. I mean, but my Tim, being the kind of age that you are now, and you've lived a kind of varied life in terms of where you've sat with your life and the things you've done and your masculinity. Like, how does that resonate with you? Like, your weight gain versus how your masculinity plays out?
Interestingly enough, like they weren't hand in hand at first. Like, the thing that made me discover my masculinity was becoming a leather man, because I was now surrounded by people who presented in a very masculine aesthetic. And even if they didn't necessarily act that way, I felt that I was in a community that for the first time I could explore what that meant. I had been skinny through most of my adulthood, and there was just something about feeling like, I had a smaller body, I had like a swimmer's build, I had a thinner face. I kind of felt like I should be in a submissive position looking like that. Like, I felt like I looked not necessarily androgynous, but I just kind of looked more feminine. you know and then I meet these leather men, and they have varying body shapes, types, degrees of body hair, like just this wild variation of body type, but they all were presenting with this masculine aesthetic. And I was like, well, maybe I can see where this leads. And then as the weight gain came on, I realized I was taking up more space. I felt larger. I felt like I occupied a bigger I felt more powerful. I began to equate masculinity with power.
It's interesting, I think, for me as well. Like, I never identified as masculine growing up, but then I didn't identify as feminine either. I was just kind of as was. And it was only through the gaining process that I actually felt like I began to discover a sense of masculinity about myself, and I began to lean into it in certain situations, which felt very empowering and very positive. So, I think it's interesting. Society definitely says that to be fat is not a good thing, especially in terms of maleness, because there's this idea of a man should be fit. Fat boys are typically unfit. You should be lean muscle to attract. We are overt flab, which also attracts, let's be clear, but that's not how society sees it. And even the shape of features, like a masculine man has a certain shape, a slimmer waist, broader shoulders, whereas arguably, by that logic, fat is almost androgifying human bodies. Like, arguably, if you took a 700-pound woman and a 700-pound man, you put them both naked in front of you, you may not be able to tell which gender each one is, because at that point the fat is so over-consuming, you can't identify them by the boobs, by the face shape, by the body shape, by the gonads, by none of it, because it's all smothered in a delicious layer of fat. And if you're 700 pounds, please hit me up. I would love to get in on that. But it's interesting that I think for us, we see that we have discovered our masculinity through weight gain rather than in spite of, and rather than a sense of losing it because of weight gain. Like, yes, weight gain challenged you in some of those ways, but do you feel like you found your masculinity again in a way through the weight gain process?
Yes, because I felt like I was losing it to a point as I was getting fat. I knew I liked it and I knew I enjoyed it, but I thought I was losing a part of me, which, I mean, it turned out couldn't be more far from the truth. I was becoming me. But during that transition, it was a lot to figure out. I was as strong as I've ever been, and but again, sports were always such a big part of my life, and I was losing that. Dating lots of women, or you're dating the hot women, I was losing that. And what's funny is I dated thin women because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, where I was lusted after larger women, and hence again becoming a feeder and all that fun stuff. But yeah, no, it was definitely a growth moment, where I had to come to terms with this is what I am, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it actually is masculine. Not that it has to be, but that's how I felt and how I feel now, where I finally come to terms with that, and especially as a sub, where having found some dominant women in my life, which has been fantastic, having those experiences. But I have to say too, I've had experiences with men that I've met on Grommr who, when they talk the right way, that it works. It absolutely works. Because it's from there, to me, it's not even about. Of course it's sexual, but it's not even about sexuality anymore. It's just about dominant and submissive. At least that's the way I've thought about it.
I wonder if you can relate to this, because this is certainly something for me. I feel like my gaining is its own sexuality, right? Like, that's its own kettle of fish. I don't understand it through a gay lens. If anything, it's the other way around. I am fat first, gay second, right? So for me, that's how I've always explained it, because I can find fat women attractive, and there's certainly conversations I've had the opportunity to have, and images that you scroll through your timeline, you come across, I found myself very aroused by. And there's a part of me that questions that, like, what is all of this? But then it's just realizing, as I say, for me, it's fat first. And so long as that box is ticked, the second one doesn't really matter so much. And I'm not so much hung up on that, because when I view things through the lens of fat, so long as it's fat, I'm good. Like, what's there to feel strange about? Like, it's arousal and it's attraction, You get to enjoy that how you enjoy that, with consent, of course. But, it doesn't have to be this whole huge flim-flam. And I think in many ways, again, like, as queer people, I was unfortunately one of the ones who, I was the born-again Christian in Bible college, had to have that uber dramatic moment of, oh, I'm gay and everything's all right, and had to work my way through that trauma. And so maybe there's an element of that as well. My brain is like, dude, we've been down this road once before about sexuality and attraction. We don't need to have this be a trauma moment. We can just be chill about things and enjoy humans, have good times, breathe through the thing, and just know that this is totally fine. So I do want to ask as well, as you say, you've had your interactions with women prior to gaining, and now, like, being in a fatter body, does that shift how you approach women, especially within like a typically gainer fetus kind of context?
It did for a long time. In other words, it really messed with my confidence. Now I have a similar confidence to when I was younger. But I also, it's funny, this equates to dating, also to theater, where I'm not afraid, but I'm realistic. And so if I see someone who, has stickers all over her car about, that she's run marathons and that she hikes, there's probably a good chance that we're not going to connect. It's not that we wouldn't or that we couldn't, but if that's what they're looking for, or specifically, I guess I should put it a better way. If I'm on a dating site and she says she's looking for someone who to go to the gym with, then I'm not her guy. And it's the same with theater. Like there's a theater near me now that's doing Jesus Christ Superstar, and auditions are next week. Anyway, and someone asked me, what part do you want? And I said, well, I want Jesus, but I said, no one's casting fat Jesus. I said, I can sing the shit out of that part. And I could play the hell out of that part. I go, but I'm realistic. It's no one's gonna do it. It's just not gonna happen. Or I shouldn't say no one, but it's not very likely. And I've said things like that before, and people are, that's bullshit. You can do anything you want. And I'm like, I appreciate what you're saying, but it's not, I don't need the pep talk. It's just, I understand how the world works, and this is what people think.
I mean, especially in the society as we have it right now. I mean, we're not even allowed to have fat Santa anymore, so I can totally understand them not wanting to cast a fat Jesus either.
Yeah, or we can't have toys with McDonald's anymore. I was just reading a list of bad ad campaigns, and I don't even remember this. I guess in 2008, Justin Timberlake was doing an ad for McDonald's that went along with maybe the Troll movie or something he was doing. And people got upset that he was pushing unhealthy food on kids, and they canceled the whole campaign. And that's been gone now since forever. And I want people to be healthy. I want people to live forever. But it's just a sad place where that's
I want people to be healthy and live long lives too, but I also am so damn tired of people pushing their children in front of them as a shield and saying, well, I don't, because they know damn well that they can't stand up and say, I just don't like this, so I don't want to see it, because that's not a good enough excuse. Adults have to put up with all kinds of things they don't like. So they push their kids in front of them and say, well, I don't want them exposed to it.
Correct. I have a friend who says, I take my daughter to McDonald's. She likes the apples better than the fries. No, she doesn't. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm willing to bet. It's like people who tell me their cat's vegan. No, it's not. You're making it be vegan. Cats are naturally carnivores. They're not naturally vegan. Dogs can be, but anyway, but it's just, I agree with you that people are trying to show how great they are through their kids. And it's just
yeah, people with children, I don't judge, though I do wonder how they sleep at night. I think, trick question, they don't, because their little cum pets are keeping them awake up until all hours. On that point, would you ever have kids? Did we talk about this last time? Do you want children?
I used to. It was all I ever wanted. I used to want to get married, and I used to want to have kids. And then most of my friends are older than I am. It just worked out. Kids in my neighborhood, I was about 5 years or so younger than most of them. And I've been very, very blessed that I'm friends with all of them. Anyway, as I watched people in my life get married, most of them I watched become miserable. And it happens. A lot of them got divorced. The ones who had kids, holy shit, like then, wow, like they're just, every one of them goes along with, forgive me, and it's bringing the name up, but Louis C.K. had a joke where he said, I had my daughters and they taught me to love in a way that I never thought that I could. They changed my life for the better in so many ways. And he said, they're just my entire life, and I love them to the moon and back. But if you gave me a time machine right now so I could go back and not have kids, I'd do it in a fucking second. And that's what I see in every single one of my friends. And it's not to say what they did was a bad thing. It's the idea of no one can ever understand what it is to have kids until you have them, and then what's the adage? To love something more than you love yourself. And that's, I guess, why a lot of people don't date others that don't have kids, because they think of them as selfish because they're not having something in their life that they're going to love more than themselves. That said, I've never met the person that I want to have kids with. I'm not against having kids, but I want to be with someone that I love so much that I want to take that journey, that I want to go into this thing that I know part of me is going to hate it. The experience.
You want to find someone you like enough to ball and chain yourself for the next eternity with raising children. No, I totally get it. You know, I think, again, similar journey, especially through the Christian lens, wanting kids and family, and now I'm at a stage where, no, thank you. But you're absolutely right. You know, I think it's a different journey for everyone, and ironically, I think a lot of the conversation you can see on TikTok these days is a lot of parents who are having, like, frank and honest conversations, basically to the tune of, can we stop circle jerking this insane fantasy that, you know, we all love it, hate it, but actually we love it? Like, no, sometimes you do just hate it, and like that's it, and you don't have to be like nice about it. Like, yeah, don't beat the shit out of your children, but also sometimes you fucking hate your kids because they're humans and you're a human, and sometimes you don't like your best friend because they're being a cunt. Sometimes your child is being a cunt, and you will say to yourself, my child is a cunt, and I hate them today. That doesn't take away from love. Like, that's just the reality of the fact that you feel things, and this weird gaslighting, invisible, silent, like, just putting up with, like, no, that's how people go, like, crazy. So let's not do that. Let's have that nuanced conversation about what it means to have children and raise children. And I mean, for goodness sake, at some stage, we'd love to have someone on the podcast who is a gainer while also raising their children, because that's a moral and ethical, like, how do you balance the two? What do you do there? You know? So again, it's all a conversation. It's all a big question. But to kind of circle back to the original point in terms of how you interact with women, the kind of sense I got from you is that, yes, there was certainly a struggle. There was a sort of relearning process. And even though arguably return on investment isn't happening, so to say, you seem at peace with how you are presenting yourself and how you're putting yourself out there, knowing that whenever it happens, that right connection will come along. Is that about right?
Oh, 100%. Yes. It's the idea of that I'm not just getting fat to attract a mate, or so I can have sex. It's being fat for me. That was probably one of the biggest moments that I had, where, you know, it's not just getting fat so I could attract someone who's into fat men. But it just I want to be this. I want to be this when I'm waking up. I want to be this when I'm in the shower. I want to be this, and with everything it comes with. So, you know, where I'm going to have trouble sitting in booths, and you know, my car is getting uncomfortable, and there's rips in the seat because of how I drop into it. Stuff like that. But I enjoy that. I really do. I liked that I had to look up weight limits for my new lounge chair. For things like that, and you know, and I'm willing to pay extra for it. I totally get that, and I get too that my job's health insurance, you get a discount if you show that you're going to the gym, and things like that. I get that. I do. I'm not saying it's how it should be for everyone, you know, but in my head, it's like, you know, yeah, I'm doing things that, according to what medical science says, and I'm not agreeing with it, but going along with the narrative of it, that I'm shortening my life. But, you know, to me, it's fine. You know what? It makes me feel like what I'm doing is working.
Yes.
And it's not, I'm saying that in a weird way, I guess. I'm not saying like that's how everyone should be, or that's how it should be for everyone, but I'm getting fatter, and people are seeing it, and I'm getting reactions to it. And I like that. They're in the same way for someone, if they wanted to lose weight and they wanted to get jacked, and people, wow, man, you look great. You know, you're freaking yoked. You know, they enjoy those kind of reactions. These are the reactions that I like, because no one's going to say to me, oh, wow, you know what? Hey, you're getting fat, looking good. Not in my life anyway, outside of in the community, which people do, and it's great, and I love it. But in my normal life, or for a person that I just meet, they're not going to say that to me. They're going to tell me how many times I get, "Hey, have you lost weight?" No. And even when I have, I still say no because fuck you.
Yeah, bury that point. Ultimately, your journey is for you, and it makes sense that a conversation around like the masculinity we experience centers on the self, because how we understand our masculinity and present our masculinity is entirely unique to us. But I like that you mentioned as well about those different relationships with women, because I kind of want to touch on men. Like how have you gone about making friends and those kinds of connections within the fetus space? Has it been difficult on your journey, or has it made more sense, seeing as it's more of a fulfillment of who you are?
It took some time. It took time for me to. I was immediately comfortable, which surprised me a little. I'll be honest. With how I was indoctrinated when I was young, but it was always a lot of well, you say you're straight, but you're not, or I'll turn you gay, and I'm like, you guys, it's.
And I mean, within that fetus space, you say it took time. Where are you at now when it comes to like having community with other men and sustaining friendships? Do you feel like you've kind of settled into a space with that now, or is it still a bit of a journey?
I feel much more comfortable with it. I feel very comfortable. Where that kind of thing has stopped, funny enough, is because I've gotten older. When I was in my 20s and my 30s, it was happening all the time. Now I get much more polite, you sure you're straight? Stuff like that. Or, I'm straight too, but I think it'd be great if we hung out and rubbed each other's bellies. And maybe there's people who are into that, and that's fine. But, for me, I'm like, no, thank you, though. And I don't get where before I would get people that would immediately turn hostile when I rejected that. And now it's just okay, or I don't hear from them again or whatever it may be. And that's totally fine. But I do, these are all on the these are all pretty fringe. That's not the norm. That's not what I've experienced. Most of what I've experienced has been very good. It's been with people like the two of you, people who are just good, accepting people. Once in a blue moon too, I would get, why are you here? And I get it, I do. But to me, I would never come back hostilely. I would just say, I love this community and I love being who I am. If I make you uncomfortable, then I apologize. Feel free to block me, or I'll block you, or if that works better. Because I remember there used to be like a limit on blocks. I don't know if there still is. But I said, I'll use one of mine if it makes you that uncomfortable. Because that's never what I wanted. I didn't want to be, you got to fucking accept me. Because that's not what I wanted to be. I just wanted to meet good people. And overall, that's really what I have. I get I'm still timid on meeting people face to face until I've gotten to know them, because I've had some bad experiences. And not to say it was my fault, but there were definitely times that I ran into it after one conversation. Yeah, sure, let's meet. Oh, your apartment? Cool. And then, come on, man, what are you doing? So, that's a 20-year-old lesson that I learned quickly. But even then, it would turn to after more conversations, let's meet at, a friendlies. And sometimes they turned out well, and other times not as well. But you take the good with the bad. But for the most part, it's been an overall very positive experience, and that's what's brought me here.
Well, it's good, and I'm glad it's been positive. I'm curious for maybe a little more specifically with straight men in the fetus space. Do you feel like there's opportunity for friendship throughout, or do you feel that maybe it angles more towards competition with one another, like you're vying to connect with the same group of people? How does that connection tend to shake down?
Um, uh, there's definitely room for the friendship, because I found it. And I invite encouragement, and I try to encourage others, as long as they're comfortable with it, and it's, again, consensual. I'm very welcoming, not only of encouragement, but I love teasing, and of people to, when it comes to a dom, I like something very specific. Excuse me. So when I welcome people try to be dominant with me, but most aren't able to be what I want, and I have a hard time explaining it. So it's not that they're falling short or failing, and I never try to say it as such. But yeah, no, I think as far as the competition side to it, I guess I can see that, where I'm another fat person, who other people are looking at instead of looking at someone else. So, that could be seen as I'm competition, and that I'm taking away from them. And again, I recognize that. That's not what I'm looking to do. But it is what I'm doing, I guess, to a point. So
it's not any easier for us to occupy the spaces than it is for a heterosexual person, because gay men, and I say gay men because Grommr is mostly populated by gay men. Like, we are just a competitive group of people. I think it's because for a lot of us, I don't know if this is going to be true of the Gen Z kids or the Alpha generation when they finally grow up, but like for millennials, Gen Xers, like there was always limited spaces, like if you were going to be queer, you kind of had to be an exceptional queer. Like, I can remember my aunt when I came out, I was 16 years old. She's like, well, what kind of gay are you? Are you like a Will type of gay? Or are you like a Just Jack kind of gay? And I was like, well, technically neither. I cannot be defined by two different stereotypes. Like, it's not like that. And that's how society viewed us. So I think gay men just kind of grew up feeling like we had to compete for attention, respect, dates, like say like if you came out in high school, which was rare in the 90s, but it still happened, and like your dating prospects were pretty much nil. So like if there was another out gay person or two out gay people, eventually one of you is going to be competing for the other, or you're going to be competing for popularity. It's something that has carried into our adult lives, unfortunately.
I do want to ask here, and maybe this begins to round us out for the episode, but, for new male fetusists who begin to join the community, what advice would you give to them in terms of, this journey of masculinity and building friendship and community and engaging and just all of that? What advice would you give to them for those tuning in?
I would start by saying, take your time. There's no rush, especially if you're young. And I remember being young and feeling like, by 26, if I didn't have a house and a car, that I was a failure. And in the same way, when I started to gain in my later 20s, I thought, if I'm not 300 pounds by next year, then I failed, or no one's going to take me seriously. And that's so not the case. You have so much time. And there's nothing wrong with peaks and valleys. There's nothing wrong with, I've gained a lot, and I think I've gained too much. And so I want to lose some weight. And then maybe I'll gain again later. There's nothing wrong with those things. And take it at your pace. If you gain some weight and the reactions you're getting are too much for you, do what puts you in a good space, in a good headspace. If that's losing weight, there's nothing wrong with that. And if it's having to change some of the people that you're normally with, even temporarily, that's nothing wrong with that either. But when you do find your place, you find that space, you find where you're good, where you're comfortable, that sweet spot, for lack of a better term, it's amazing. because it's who you were meant to be, and now you finally get to be that. And I know there's people that are still looking for it and who haven't found it, and I want to be your cheerleader. I want you to get there, and I want to try to. I've tried so many times to help people, who ask for advice and things like that, and just some I think I've been okay, and some I don't think I've helped at all. Whether it's been through my own shortcomings or it just wasn't there, but that's fine. There's no. Your expectations should only be your own, and keep them realistic. If you want to be 700 pounds, go for it. But find the right people to help you get there. Don't take the help of the wrong person, because if you do, you could wind up in a really bad way. I've come pretty close a few times. And, I'm glad I was able to figure it out before. Because once that, in the Irish community they call alcohol the creature, but you could talk about it with sex, and when it comes to having something like gaining, when that creature stirs, it's hard to say no. So it can definitely put us into some bad places and have us make some bad decisions that we can't always take back.
Definitely. I mean, Tim, does this not circle back to topics on season 2 about mentorship? And sometimes I think the frustration I feel when I see new gainers is just cycles repeating and people just not intervening in time. And it's hard because you just look at these young kids and you're like, dude, like if you were in a position to listen, because that's another thing, right? Like you can be in a position to talk, they may not be in a position to listen.
Yeah. 100%. Oh my God, yeah.
And that's a whole
yes.
fish. But, to any new male fetus listening, listen to what XL Tim is saying, and listen to what our Tim is saying. These guys have been around for years now, and they've had their successes and they've had their achievements, and they have community. When they speak truth, and they speak from experience, and they speak from knowledge, and they speak about all these things. So please, my advice would be to be kind of like what you were saying, XL Tim. Choose carefully who you listen to, right? Like if you want to learn
very much,
if you want to learn how to make $1 million, don't ask the gambler, right? How he handles his money, because that's not good investment. Talk to the guy who runs business, right? Like you want to learn how to cook. Don't talk to the person who all they do is order takeout. Like talk to the person who's posting and promoting that they cook every single day. Because you've got to learn from the people who are succeeding in doing the thing that you want to do, because that's who's going to give you the information on how to succeed, the person who's succeeding in the thing you want to do. That sounds obvious as fuck, and yet all of us make that mistake constantly. So I would say just be choosing, be careful, be mindful, and be open to those new experiences. But I think that brings us to the end of another fabulous episode. Tim, thank you so much for joining us this week again.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to this.
Oh, now where can the listeners find you online?
Let's see. On Grommr, I am the unfortunately named plumpmygut, which I came up with at a very young age. Let's see. On what is the one called Tumblr, I am timmysnuggles. Feabie, I am timtim. And on Instagram, I am timmyct20.
Fabulous stuff. Well, listen, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and beefyfrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and beefyfrat at thiccymouse. You can also look us up on Instagram and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can find the link in the show notes. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Vicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by BlueSky.